This edition contains language that may be offensive to some listeners.
Step forward into your cave. That's right. You're going deeper into your cave.
Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. And we're very, very pissed off. First rule of Fight Club is...
No. Whether it's the Old Testament or Shakespeare.
It's puzzling.
You know what divine intervention is?
Spare us your Leninist philosophy just this once.
This is Watching Theology.
Welcome to Watching Theology, Season 4. The first episode of Season 4, the first episode of Season 2010. And I know you're all thinking, maybe this year Melissa will come back into it. I've decided I'm not waiting for Melissa, but I'm also not doing monologues for another year. So I've been very fortunate, and if you were a listener to the old Watching the Directors podcast that's still available, you might remember a couple episodes. If you listen to those, I can't remember the episodes of the Kubrick. You heard the voice already, so this is a teaser.
Uh-oh.
The Kubrick and Tarantino, and then also the other crazy guy from Monty Python.
Yep.
Yeah.
That
guy. Terry Gilliam.
There we go.
We were joined by one Duke Center.
Woo!
Who was at the time doing a podcast of his own until his wife and his partner's wife, and by partner I mean friends. They were just friends,
yes.
Despite his partner's interest otherwise. Yeah, but their wives made them quit that because one day he's going to run for political office and it would come back and hurt him.
Yes.
So, but Duke has been practicing all this time alone in his studio.
That's right.
Ready to get back into the podcast film fray, and he's going to be joining me for whenever I can get him this season. And that's why we're starting this season with a guy film.
Yes.
So, Duke, any words to our audience before we...
No, I was just wondering, though, is Melissa just going to sit here and look at me with this evil look this whole time?
If she isn't, we'll get it on the screensaver, and she can just bop around, move from corner to corner, like a little screensaver staring at you. And yeah, it's her own fault if she doesn't want to be part of this. And we'll talk about it. Really in Fight Club, is there any room for a woman?
No.
There isn't any.
None.
But there are room for women listeners, so don't turn us off if you're a female listener. We'll talk a little bit more about that in that, but let's go through our preamble. This is the stuff that we talk about at every show. Again, before I get to the preamble, the pre-preamble.
Oh, gosh.
The what's the prolongo? Oh, I can't remember the word. Prolegomena.
Okay.
The pre-prolegomena. That we're going to try and do something a little better this season. We're going to be a little more mainstream. And not only will you not be listening to monologues from me, we're going to watch films that other people have watched. And I know that there's a dozen of you that have seen Breaking the Waves and that actually went through and tried to find an old copy out of Singapore or something to watch that. And maybe 3 or 4 of you that saw Brigham City. Fight Club, a lot of you have seen.
Yes.
All right. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be a little more mainstream this year, and we're not afraid. If we say we're selling out, that's cool. Just give us the price. I'm ready to sell out.
Yes.
All right. So here's the basic ground rules and the concept behind the show, especially if you tuned out for a year and you're coming back to us. We'll cover this. We're looking at the theological, philosophical, and thematic text of a film. We're looking at those ideas, the theology, philosophy, and just themes that come out of a film text. And so we have an assumption, which is that some movies speak. Not every movie. I didn't get to watch Alvin and the Chipmunks this weekend, The Squeakquel.
The Squeakquel? My kids did.
It was sold out in Yakima yesterday. I had to accept Avatar instead.
Oh, that's too bad.
It happens. But Avatar, I think, had something to say.
Yes.
Avatar had a lot to say.
Yes.
We're going to have to talk about Avatar sometime.
I agree.
And don't wait for DVD if you haven't seen that film. If you don't watch it in the theater, digital 3D at the minimum, you're wasting your time waiting for the DVD. So, and then, okay, we have a rule that goes along with the idea that some movies speak, and that is we try and let the movies do the talking first. We don't try and baptize the film. We let it come in, we watch it, we see what ideas come out of it, and then we'll discuss whether we agree or disagree with those ideas, what they have to say. But we don't try and baptize the film and turn it into a parable or a life lesson.
Or an allegory.
An allegory.
If it wasn't meant to be.
Yes.
Okay. A couple disclaimers. We're going to discuss some plot points, some spoilers, some endings. So make sure you watch the movie first before you listen to us ramble on about it. Also, listening to a film is not the same as agreeing.
I thought it was perfectly clear, but apparently there's some confusion on this.
Possibly a little.
All right, so Duke asked me this question, what the heck does that mean? and what it means is there are a lot of people who watch movies and are scared of movies still. Now, some of us watch movies too freely without any real healthy dose of fear to them, because movies contain ideas. Movies have things to say. But one of the reasons that we do watch films is to listen to ideas. But it doesn't mean because I watch Fight Club, I have to agree with the worldview of Fight Club or anything else I've watched. It's that we're entering a conversation with a text, the same we would with a book, the same we would with a newspaper column.
We're watching it critically.
We're watching it critically. We're listening to what it says. And we don't have to agree with what the text says to listen to it. And in fact, I think that's the best way to do it, is to listen to it. And then you can agree or disagree from there. But listen first.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And just my little thing, since I'm starting in on this journey along with you, hopefully for a while. I watch movies for entertainment first, almost always. It's a little bit of work for me to watch it otherwise. So I think maybe something that I need to remember, that it's not always just entertainment, and I don't want to entertain myself to death, which is part of the reason I enjoy this podcast, is that you do think critically about it.
And my job is because I'm working on my second graduate degree, and it's all about it's all about textual analysis all again, that I overanalyze it. So this will be good. I mean, and if you listen to season 3, you can tell what happens when I'm left alone in a room with a movie and a microphone.
Just not pretty.
It's not good. I had to bring in my daughter. Brought in my daughter for Creature of the Black Lagoon, and basically turned it into I had my daughter talking feminist and racial critical theories.
Yeah.
Not good.
Good job there.
Yeah, well, she's at her grandma's today, so she's recovering. So, but all right, listen to the Creature from Black Lagoon episode. I highly recommend it. My daughter is awesome and brilliant. So, all right, Fight Club.
Fight Club.
A little bit about Fight Club.
Oh, I gotta love the intro on the DVD. Starts off with a little bit of very nice music on a record player for about 3 seconds. Then the needle rips off, and then it is driving music.
It's kind of like the show.
Yeah.
Because it starts mellow and it gets pretty intense.
Yes.
Yeah, some good Chemical Brothers ripped in there and stuff like that. And then the scream of Brad Pitt and it's a great intro. Well, the DVD is relevant because they just released the Blu-ray of this, and in November was the 10th anniversary Fight Club. One of the reasons we want to come back to this film was to talk, we'll come to this point 1, masculinity in the 20th century. What's life like being a man 10 years after Fight Club? But if you haven't seen Fight Club, I would say go and watch it.
Yeah.
Unless you are easily offended, because it's a very it's a pretty violent and vulgar and aggressive film. It's fast paced, but it isn't a friendly snowflake to borrow from it.
Yeah.
But if you're game for it, it's based on a Chuck Palahniuk novel, one of my favorite working authors, and it is a story of basically a narrator in this film who goes unnamed, who goes by different names, sort of vicariously. He's called Jack. He's also called Cornelius and Rupert and Travis. And he enters this relationship with a guy named Tyler Durden. And by the end of the movie, it's turned into an anarchist movement. Mm-hmm. It's a really remarkable analysis of life at the end of the 20th century, life at the end of the second millennium, and from the perspective of, say, us Gen X folk. So,
yeah.
That's the critical Bob. You're going to say it. It really rocks.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And even though the first rule of Fight Club is not talk about Fight Club, we are breaking that rule right here.
We're not tough enough to be in Fight Club, so we can break in the rule. We're recording this in a garage, and the thought of hitting each other has not occurred to either one of us. All right, well, let's talk about not the first rule of Fight Club. First, we already did the rules of watching theology. Let's talk about the first point of Fight Club, and that's masculinity at century's end. What does it mean to be a male according to Fight Club?
It looks like it's a very I guess Edward Norton's character is a very kept man of his own devices. Mm-hmm. He lives alone. He purchases furniture on his own, which he enjoys doing. He's got a pretty good job he's an analyst for a car manufacturer to decide whether or not to pay off a family or have a recall or anything like that.
It's really litigious. It's sort of a cross between accounting and some kind of life analysis, putting a dollar value on human life.
Yeah, very utilitarian.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of the key to most of the movie is, what really is utilitarianism, because there's this financial balance at the beginning of it down to, what really do you have to survive along in there?
No, the question of masculinity here is that the idea of masculinity has been blown open. Fight Club could not have happened 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Sure. It is the idea that masculinity is a blank slate at this point in time. And there's a lot of talking here about fathers. What kind of example did fathers? Well, the example they left was they didn't connect or they abandoned. Right. And we have no idea, because we don't have any idea of fathers. This also becomes an issue of, since our idea of God is based on our idea of fathers, do we have an idea of God? What does God think of us because what have our fathers thought of us?
Our fathers were our models for God. If our fathers failed, what does that tell you about God?
No, I don't.
Listen to me. You have to consider the possibility that God does not like you, never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. This is not the worst thing that can happen.
It isn't.
We don't need him.
We don't. I agree.
Fuck damnation, man. Fuck redemption. We are God's unwanted children. So be it.
Okay, so
Listen.
These are people flying blind, trying to redefine masculinity. They've decided not to do it in the normal way because they're 30-something. Tyler and, we'll call him Jack. Let's call him Jack, Edward Norton's character, the narrator.
Well, he's Jack's body parts.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Tyler, yeah, Jack, Tyler, I don't. So, yeah. All right, or Ed Norton, So. All right, so Jack doesn't know where he belongs in the world. Tyler seems to know where he belongs, but both of them have rejected the normal paths. They haven't decided to get married, to go to college, get married at 22, have a family, and move to the suburbs. They've rejected that life, although Jack seems to be living the surrogate form of that, which is to get an apartment, furnish it according to the latest fashions, have a respectable job, and build yourself up to a nice retirement.
Mm-hmm.
I had it all. I had a stereo that was very decent, a wardrobe that was getting very respectable. I was close to being complete.
Shit, man, now it's all gone.
All gone. All gone.
But I think he's again taking the utilitarian way of living out his masculinity. Mm-hmm. He lives in an apartment building that has 1 foot thick concrete walls, so that he's not disturbed by others around him. And it was for widows and something. So he's really trying to not connect with society in that regard. However, he needs something. He develops insomnia, and he needs to fill a gap of connecting with people. So he turns to support groups for things that he doesn't have.
Right.
So it lowers the barriers of acceptance that way. So you don't have the normal, romantic barriers that you have to overcome. Everyone is accepted in the group as soon as they show up. And as he mentions, that if you don't say anything, people assume the worst, so they accept you even more tightly and more quickly. And then I think it really comes to a point at the testicular cancer survivors group, where Meatloaf asks, we're still men, right?
Right, Bob. Bob. Robert Paulson. His name is
Robert Paulson.
We're still men.
Yes, we're men. Men is what we are.
But again, it's very utilitarian. Mm-hmm. He gets the connection. He lets himself go, is able to cry. Now he can go to sleep. So that was the whole point of it. But I think it's descriptive of that need for connection. That if he didn't have that connection, which gets ruined by the tourist.
Now, Bob is an older character. He's older. He's sort of a father figure. He has a family of his own until his family rejects him.
Right.
There is another father introduced, I think, in the testicular one that talks about, it's just this bit part, but he talks about, my wife is happy now and she just had a baby and I'm so happy for her, and he breaks down.
Yeah.
As you look through this film, are there any successful men in this movie? Are there any role models in this movie?
I don't see any, and I think that's kind of the allure of Tyler, is that he's got it figured out. He's very smart. He's very intelligent, at least when it comes to chemistry, and he's using it in a somewhat positive way. But he's living life on his own terms. He takes odd jobs to be able to pay the bills, and affords him the opportunity to put one frame of film from porno movies into other movies. But I mean, he's got the cool sunglasses, the red leather jacket, larger than life, jumps into the red convertible, and Tyler just jumps into the car and off he goes. Life is easy for him, and he's got life figured out.
Tyler, you are by far the most interesting single-serving friend I've ever met. See, I have this thing, everything on a plane is single-serving, even the...
Well, I get it. It's very clever.
Oh, thank you.
How's that working out for you?
Now, what we realize, though, is in this whole of masculinity, there's a vacuum of masculinity. So the film is about trying to figure out how to deal with that. Tyler is one of the answers. Tyler is a projection. He's not the idea of masculinity. He's Jack's ideal projection of masculinity.
Right.
And we learn that, of course, later at the ending, and that's the great twist. I think it's just as interesting to watch once you know that.
Right.
Because you get to see now the question isn't, oh gosh, that's a split personality, and this you could actually see is what is Jack's perspective on masculinity.
Right.
Tyler is Jack. You could say Tyler. This is Jack's view of masculinity. This is what it means to be a man.
Right.
That question that Bob is trying to kind of ask him at the beginning, right? The question in the kind of non-testicular, high estrogen voice that Meatloaf carries in his voice.
Right. But I think Jack is very derisive towards Bob. When he's mentioning him, he has bitch tits.
Right.
It's not that he has man boobs or he's developed breasts or anything like that. It's
effeminate. There's something anti-masculine about it.
Right.
He is,
and he hugs Ed Norton immediately. Starts crying, has the high voice, and he's what masculinity has become. He started off as a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
I think Jack's perspective on masculinity is embodied in Bob.
Yeah, and it's the perversion, right? It's unattainable. It's unsustainable. Well, there's another problem in the Fight Club universe. The masculinity model is gone, and that's going to lead to the need for these support groups. It's going to need the lead for Tyler. There's another problem, and that is the ideal of what fills that void. Another thing that fills that void, we've already alluded to, is IKEA, is commercialism. What does it mean then if you have no idea of masculinity? You have a hole where other generations did not have a hole. The basic identity of what it means to be a man, that's gone. We fill it with sport. We fill it with furniture.
Right.
Like so many others, I had become a slave to the IKEA nesting instinct. Yes, I'd like to order the Erica Picari dust ruffles.
Please hold.
This is a wonderful scene in here. This is where if we were a video podcast, we'd show you the scene.
It'd be awesome.
Is that there's that zoom and you see Jack sitting on the toilet looking at a magazine, and everybody who looking at it knows what the next scene is. He's going to reach his hand over and pleasure himself.
All right, okay.
That's not that kind of podcast, right? But what he does is he turns the magazine vertically, and we expect as the camera splits to it that we're going to be seeing a naked woman in there. Instead, we see furniture. It's an IKEA catalog. And so this idea, and I think it's safe to use the word, the masturbatory idea is out of this catalog that it's a form of this. And this becomes brought home as they're riding the train. Tyler and Jack are riding the train, and they have this scene where they're talking about these advertisements of what it means to be a man.
Right.
And is that what a man looks like?
The Calvin Klein ad.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I felt sorry for guys packed into gyms, trying to look like how Calvin Klein or Tommy Hilfiger said they should. That what a man looks like?
Self-improvement is masturbation. Now self-destruction.
That is self-improvement, all these things. The idea that you talked about as we were prepping for the show, condiments, are forms of this kind of masturbatory self-image production. And ultimately, that's going to be empty too.
Right.
So condiments are stuck in your mind. What did you think about condiments?
Yeah, where his refrigerator gets blown out of his apartment, and he says, I've got a refrigerator that's full of condiments, but no food. And he talks about the single serving friendships, the single serving life that he's living. it's all focused on the surface, on the flavor. There's no meat. And I think that's really talking about masculinity. You know, if someone has right now it's kind of fashionable to have a man cave, so described, which we call this the studio, not the man cave here.
It's a man cave.
But so yeah, you have a man cave, and you know what's the big deal about a man cave? Well, it's going to have TV or computer, video games. Not to overuse this term, but it's electronic masturbation, really.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what the condiments are in his refrigerator. It has no substance. We're just concerned with, you know, the little bits of flavor here and there, and you can't sustain life on it.
No. So this really comes to the issue. The Fight Club proposes a couple ideas. It says, now, the idea of masculinity is gone. Nothing's worked in the past. We have to find a new idea. And it's not going to be solved by commercialism. Eventually, they drop out of support groups, although in the book, the support groups still play a larger role in this. So what do we do in the vacuum? And that becomes the rise of the cult.
Yes.
And Fight Club proposes a couple different religious ideas. The initial one is the support groups. Starts in a Methodist church, starts in the Episcopalian church. These are somewhat religious mini cults, mini organizations built around a single leader, groups of disciples, teaching and dealing with some major sin issue or life issue that needs to be solved.
Why do you do it?
I don't know. When people think you're dying, man, they really, really listen to you instead of just
waiting for their turn to speak.
Does that work?
It works to a point for him
until the woman messes everything up, right?
Until the tourist comes in, yeah, and he can't feel free to express himself, to cry so that he can sleep. Then he meets up with Tyler, and Tyler has this notion that, you know, just hit me, hit me, just go ahead and hit me.
Wait, this is crazy. You want me to hit you?
That's right.
What, like in the face?
Surprise me.
It's very difficult for Jack to do that. Eventually, you know, punches him in the ear, which is pretty hilarious. But I think it's that first time that he actually feels something. Because when he was crying before, he never really talked about, you know, he said he was letting himself go and crying, but it wasn't for any purpose. You know, he wasn't crying because he was sad. He wasn't crying because he hated his life. He just cries.
Yeah.
And really has gotten to the point where there's no high, there's no low. He's comfortably numb.
To quote Pink Floyd, let me quote Warren Zevon. I was listening to Warren Zevon on the way here, and he has this old song called "Ain't That Pretty at All." And I'm going to throw myself against the wall because I'd rather feel bad than not feel anything at all.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's that. That's the line in here. The support groups are ultimately compromised by the tourist. What can he do that nothing else? And he can feel pain, and that pain is liberating. It's like, that hurts, but let's do it again because I feel something now.
Right.
This becomes the religion, and it creates this central cult figure, this Tyler Durden, and it creates a uniform, and there's these rituals that they go through, these sayings, and as it develops into Project Mayhem, it gets even more intricate.
Right.
The preparation of levels of disciples. We get these key apostles, and then there's this lower level of disciples develops. And Paul Nuck even talks about his idea of having these new disciples stand out on the porch for 3 days was taken from a Zen monk perspective, that they stand out there 3 days and wait to be admitted. So there are these tremendous religious connotations, and it's even more obvious in the book. And that becomes the final attempt to fill the void.
Right.
That is the Project Mayhem becomes the final. It becomes the religious systematization of a cult. You have a religious system developing with Project Mayhem.
Yeah, and it's I think you said before, you know, it's the non-religious religious thing.
No, it's not a religion in the sense of like Christianity is a religion with a history. It's the way that a natural religion starts, with a cultic figure, an idea. It responds to an issue within the society, and there's this strong prevalence. And it's a religion also in the way that after the cultic figure disappears for some reason, it still has the means to survive.
Right. I think the the religious overtones come in when he's talking with the guy in the halo who's broken his neck or something.
Yeah, this is Jack trying to track down Tyler.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's the bartender that has the brace that's holding his head in place and all that. And he says, have I ever been here before? And the guy says, is this a test? And it's very confusing for the man in the halo, because all the rules of Fight Club and of Project Mayhem are you don't ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
You don't talk about it. No one can try and stop it. It's all of these rules that are put into place to make sure that it succeeds no matter what. So it's very confusing when he says, is this a test? He's like, no, it's not a test. Have I ever been here before? He's like, yeah, you were standing right there. And that's when he finally starts to get some truth out of the guy. But the guy's very, very concerned because he keeps saying, is this a test? And I think
he also always calls him sir, and that's important. He's always given that respect to sir, which is basically the American English equivalent of Lord.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So not to draw too many illusions, but
but I think it's there for a reason, and whether it's satire or parody of religion, it's really got some pretty good insight into human need. If we continue to use anesthesia of entertainment or of relationships or of purchasing and consumerism, that eventually you're going to become numb, and something is going to have to take that place.
Celebrity magazines, television with 500 channels, some guy's name on my underwear, Rogaine, Viagra, Olestra, Martha Stewart. Fuck Martha Stewart. Martha's polishing the brass on the Titanic. It's all going down, man.
It looks pretty appealing on the surface, except for all the blood of being in a fight club. You have this acceptance, you have this camaraderie. The winner and loser of the fight embrace at the end, and they're like, "Wasn't that great? Both of us feel wonderful."
Yeah. But even the Fight Club was artificial because there were rules. You had to take off rings. You see people taking off rings. There's a tap out.
Third rule of Fight Club: someone yells stop, goes limp, taps out. The fight is over. Fourth rule: only 2 guys to a fight. Fifth rule: 1 fight at a time, fellas. Sixth rule: no shirts, no shoes.
There was only one fight in that where there was something really dangerous happening, where somebody lost control.
Right.
And you started to see, even when these guys try and create their own religion, when they try and create their own system, they have to do it by certain rules. I mean, the first thing we know about Fight Club is there are rules.
Yeah.
And that only works until Project Mayhem blows up, and you're left with that big question. It's the question that Robert Redford asks at the end of the movie, The Candidate. Now what? Right. And the movie rolls the credits before it tries to answer that question, because it's set up the problem, which is we don't know who we are. We don't know who our fathers are. We don't know who our God is. So we're starting back from scratch. And if that means we destroy all civilization to get there, so be it.
Right.
But the one thing it does say is that impossible question that drives us to the despair, that nice question that pops out in the book of Ecclesiastes or other places, or that has always pervaded philosophy until philosophy became about language systems, is why are we here? And Fight Club is a film based on a book that is so insistent about it, asking that question afresh, an old question asked in a really entirely new way. And ultimately, I don't know if it has that answer.
Yeah, because I think it's all about the artificialness of the system that's been put into place, and I think that's something that we tend to go to as people, especially in this culture, this American culture, Western society, that we're too free now. Yeah. We have too many options. We make too much money, so that we have this disposable income. What are we supposed to do with it? And how is it going to make us feel when we dispose of it? We have too much of an open field at that point.
Yeah.
And so we have to start caging ourselves with these rules put up into place so that we know what drives us. And I think that's the allure of the beginning of the fights, is that, well, now what are we going to do? Well, let's do something that we can feel. That makes us feel stuff. That's great. But it also eliminates all the options. When you're in the middle of a fight, it's just down to one of two things. You either try to inflict damage or you're going to receive damage until you give up. And that, to a certain extent, is liberating because all the choices are removed.
What? Hitting bottom isn't a weekend retreat. It's not a goddamn seminar. Stop trying to control everything and just let go. Let go!
All right, fine.
The system that the cult builds up is we build all these rules. We know what we're supposed to be doing. We don't have too much freedom of thought so that we get out in the middle and we don't know what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, we've run a little bit long, so let's run a little longer and ask this question. One of the reasons I want to look at this is 10th anniversary of Fight Club as the movie. The book's a little bit longer out, obviously. Yeah. Where are we 10 years later? And maybe we can ask this question. We can ask in a grand scope of societally, but maybe we can ask this question in a smaller scope of as masculinity. We're both Gen Xers. We're in the 30-something range. Yeah. Some of us are toward the end of that range more closely than others. But this film was a gut check. It was the end. Looking back at where we had come as a country, as a people, as a society, as Western thought, and realizing that everything we built for ourselves, especially everything we built for ourselves since World War II, was an artifice. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we're out of answers, and we asked this big final question in 1999, and now we're in 2010. What does it mean to be masculine? If you had, let's assume that Jax survives this. Mm-hmm. And he's 10 years older. He's in his 40s now. Or Bob, Robert Paulson survives. He says, we're still men, aren't we? Yeah. And what does it mean to be a man now, 10 years later? Have we gotten any closer to that?
Oh, man. I don't know. And I think the scary thing is Fight Club at the beginning of the movie really looks like it's got some answers. Mm-hmm. And to a certain extent, I'm, kind of scarily drawn to it, I'm like, yeah, gosh, IKEA. I'm looking around and I've got IKEA crap around my house, and
my house is 65% IKEA. Yeah.
And I've got a job that's okay, fairly successful, fairly utilitarian. So, what does that say about me? And, well, now they have a goal. They have this drive. I'm like, like I said, that's scarily appealing until you play it out and realize that, okay, that's also a dead end. Ed Norton's going to go to jail then at the end of that movie. And
a psych ward.
Yes, and probably still not accomplish the goals of getting rid of all credit, because being in the IT industry as I am, I know that there's backups in lots of different places. So, mission was not accomplished there, although it's very poetic and seems good. So yeah, where do you go next? I think, like you were mentioning, but when we were talking before this podcast, there was that this is kind of in the Clinton era with Fight Club, and now we've gone through the Bush era,
the September 11th world and everything it implied,
right? And
now the Obama world, the sophisticated, elusive speaker that who knows, not, this isn't a political show, but he's a very different type. None of these, neither Bush or Obama fit into the 20th century. Yeah. But they are different types of form of this male leadership than was evident here in this Clinton administration, where we're still trying to figure out masculinity, what it meant.
Right. And I think Bush has a fractured representation, the classic,
Tyler Durden.
Well, the 1950s, greatest generation. Yeah. He's got resolve and a plan to take care of things.
Mm-hmm. Obama's more 20s and 30s progressive liberalism. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so we have these ideas coming up over and over again. Bush, however, looks like the idiot. So now anyone who's got this, very strong resolve, ignoring everything else around him, that can't work.
Yeah.
And we're seeing how, Obama's representation of masculinity appears to be more thoughtful anyway.
Don't write in about this. We're not really we don't really care about the politics and we're not interested. But
I guess the whole point is that it's still scary being a guy. There's not a whole lot of
You and I
solutions.
have taken a pretty similar solution. and it's one that rejected by Tyler and Jack, which is in 1999, I got married.
You can't get married. I'm a 30-year-old boy.
We're a generation of men raised by women. I'm wondering if another woman is really the answer we need.
And I have 3 kids. You have 2.
Yeah.
You have your kids are older than mine, and you're ready for this junior high era and all this.
Yeah.
I'm not even close. My daughter turns 9 this month, and and that's my oldest. But we found some peace in that. I think we found some meaning being fathers.
Yeah.
And we both remember what our fathers are like, and we evaluate our fathering by how our fathers fathered, for good or for ill. And then I think you and I, we both have sons, and so we're both really conscious about how we father and what what image of masculinity we do for our children. And I assume it's been like that for ages.
Yeah. And I guess the scary thing is in Fight Club, it seemed like the father figures were directive and not relationary, I guess.
Yeah.
It was, okay, this is what you do next, this is what you do next, this is what you do next. And they're like, well, that doesn't sound like the right answer to me, so never mind. Get married.
Yep.
Like, I don't think that's the right answer, so I'm not going to do it, and I'll figure out my own thing.
So I graduate. I call him up long distance. I said, Dad, now what? He says, get a job.
Same here.
Now I'm 25. Make my yearly call again. I say, Dad, now what? He says, I don't know. Get married.
Then there's our fathers are our model for God, and they didn't work for us, so what does that say about God?
Right.
And I think that's not to get too far into my belief system, but
we both did that too. We both became parents. We became fathers. We are both pretty devoted religiously to a relatively traditional system of religious worship.
Yeah.
So we both have bought into the system that Tyler and Jack haven't considered as an option.
Right.
That worked for another generation. And so 10 years after, I'm not sure that I came up with anything revolutionary. I find myself being pretty conservative when it all comes down to it. Right. I want to raise my kids, have a good life for them, not be overly commercial, not be overly invested in this world, but actually care about something greater than this world. But it still comes off on the surface level as white, middle class, Anglo-Saxon Protestant. There's what we have to offer to the world.
Yeah. How much more comfortable can we possibly get? And yet there's still more that we feel needs to happen. And Fight Club exposes the void. The thing that I see is that it's a God-shaped void. And the thing that they see is, first of all, you have to be brought down to nothing, and then you're truly free.
Yeah.
You need to embrace the pain, focus on the pain, don't leave the pain. The Lyburn scene is just extraordinary, and he's bringing forth these father versus God images, and you gotta get down to nothing first before you're free to do whatever you want.
Right.
And then, are you truly free to do whatever you want when you've reached that?
Or you can use vinegar to neutralize the burn.
Please let me have it, please.
First, you have to give up. First, you have to know, not fear, know that someday you're gonna die.
You don't know how this feels.
It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything.
It's 2 last song lyrics, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Janis Joplin through the pen of Chris Christopherson. And perhaps the most controversial lyric ever sung by a Christian or professing Christian, Bono, in 1987, singing, I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Which is a statement of he understood what his foundation was, but something was still wrong. And maybe that's where we can talk 10 years after Fight Club and say, Fight Club still works on us.
Yeah.
Fight Club still points out a problem, a flaw in the system, something wrong in the machine, a glitch in the matrix, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, we obviously could say a lot more.
Yeah, it's such a great movie, and like I said, on the surface, it's very entertaining, but it's also very deep as well.
Yeah,
and you get a little twist in there as well, so you have to watch it a second time at the very least.
Well, we'll wrap this up, and we'll get to. Duke talked about the idea of doing another series, and this will be a much better series than the God Silence series.
Because I thought of it.
Yes, it's really. We're going to do a series on deception, and this will be the first film in deception. We haven't quite figured out what the parameters of this are, but we're looking at films in which characters or systems of reality are deceived. And Fight Club obviously works at several levels on that, is that the reality of the system isn't working. The reality either with interior inside the film, or we would call it diegetically, or extra diegetically outside the film. It's criticizing something that isn't working, a reality that isn't real enough. Yeah. And so we're going to be looking at a series of probably 5 films, Fight Club being the first, of films that deal with these questions of reality. Our next film, on the next Watching Theology, at Duke's suggestion, M. Night Shyamalan's No, Not Sixth Sense. Yes, we know there's a twist in that film. We're going to look at The Village. Go back and watch The Village. Yeah. And we'll talk about that on our next episode, and some of the issues in reality there, and whatever happened to Dallas Bryce Howard.
Spider-Man 3 happened to her.
Oh, that one did it. So
yeah, that killed everything.
All right. Well, we don't have a mailbag because I've been boring everybody to tears for a year, but and I took a 6-month hiatus.
Yeah.
So,
but how many hiatuses can you? Is that hiati?
It's probably hiati.
Yeah, you've taken a few of those, haven't you?
Yeah, but I'm still season 4, and as podcasts go, that's pretty. Yeah. That's aged.
That's true.
So we haven't, it's quality.
Quality versus quantity.
Yes. So, well, if you want to get hold of us, to Duke or I, send an email to mail@watchingtheology.com, or you can go to www.watchingtheology.com, or also another option is stevebrownetc.com, and find a post to this, and go ahead and just write a comment on the podcast page. There you'll find some show notes, probably not many, and a link to a book you can purchase called Watching. I can't remember what the whole title is. I should know. Watching, Some Writings on Film, a book, a compilation of things that Melissa and I had written together. And it's like $18 plus shipping. So.
You wrote it and you can't remember what it's called?
Yeah, well, it's that good. So, but I think that's pretty much all.
Actually, I've read some excerpts from the book, and it's pretty good.
It's pretty spellbinding.
Yeah,
it's at least as good as this podcast. Well, that's really more than I should have said. That's all I have to say. So, Duke, any final words on Fight Club Watching Theology Season 4, or what it means to be a man?
No. Actually, with that setup, that was a terrible setup. I want to talk about The Village. I'm ready for The Village now. So,
all right.
It's actually
what it means to be a monster or a blind woman in a colonial village.
Yeah, and actually, I've mentioned to a couple folks that we're looking at doing The Village next, and I've been surprised at the reception. People have said, "Yeah, that's my favorite Shyamalan movie,"
including me.
Yeah.
So on that in Unbreakable, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he has made some good movies. He's made some tankers, but he's made some good ones as well. So I would really encourage anyone that hasn't seen The Village yet to watch it. Great colors, good soundtrack,
wonderful score. Horner, I think, right? Yeah. So.
And it's it's not a simplistic.
And Dallas Bryce Howard before she became a mermaid.
Yeah.
really, really bad.
A mermaid.
Yeah.
And when was she a mermaid?
In the water one. The next one.
Lady in the Water.
Lady in the Water.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have that one and kind of like it too, but it's beside the point.
Well, yeah. And that's all. We hope you have had a great Christmas, a great New Year, and if you're into that sort of thing, a wonderful Epiphany.
Yes.
And end of the Advent and Christmas season. All right. We'll see you. We'll listen to you soon. No, you'll hear us. You'll listen to us soon.
We'll read about you if you write to us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Unless Melissa takes the podcast back over. And this may provoke her to finally do In Bruges. Maybe one day In Bruges will come out. That's all right. Thanks for listening.
Watching Theology is a program examining the theological, philosophical, and thematic world of the movies. Contact the show by emailing mail@watchingtheology.com or visit the website watchingtheology.com. Theme music is provided by Deerfoot from ilovedeerfoot.com.
You want to go to the movies?
I'm sick of movies.
Oh.
Monsters from the id.